And we're back. Thank you for joining me for this fifth and hopefully final installment of simple dialogue, how to build a simple dialogue system in Unity. During this final tutorial, we're going to take a look at closing down our state machine. What we're going to do when we exit collision with the dialogue character. So when we leave our collision, our dialogue trigger, we're going to close down the UI, and we're going to make sure that we reset the state back to the beginning. We're going to fix this issue we have with closing, where it doesn't want to close any of the screen, and it doesn't want to set the buttons correctly. So we're gonna fix all this stuff in this final tutorial. And I'm also going to introduce inventory management. I'm going to bring up this inventory panel that we made earlier. I'm going to show you how to add inventory objects using the dialog system, also assembling yet another script for our animator so we can do it very easily through the state machine. So that's the goal, is to be able to purely manipulate the state machine and set serialized fields, be able to just generate, okay, now I'm going to give you an object, and here's the object in your inventory, and then if you have it, I'm not going to give it to you again, and if you're trying to take away an item, make sure the player has it, and all that type of inventory, just resource management stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in. Where I want to get started this time is I want to get started in the close dialog state script. So we're going to make a new script, new C# script called tutorial dialog close state. All right, and I'm going to pop this open. And this is also going to derive from state machine behavior. So we're not going to use update and start. But instead, what we're going to do for this one is very similar to how we started the dialog state. The very first thing we need to do is set all of our answers to false. So we're going to need this same for loop in here. But we're not going to need any of the other stuff. We're just going to need this. So this way we have, that's what I did. On state enter, I need to grab all of these lines, and we're going to pop them into that function, and that should work fine. Alright, why this is formatting weird, I don't know. But it did, so here we go. Alright, so we have now a reference to our dialog manager that we have to the safety of our try-catch statement here. And we're setting each one of the answers to false inside of our animator, inside of our state machine, whatever, setting all of our answers to false. And then what we want to do is grab this reference to the dialog manager, and we want to make sure we do the set active dialog panel, and we want to set it to false. So what this is doing is deactivating our dialog panel. Remember, we made this set active dialog panel function in the dialog manager, and stop showing me this. So we made this function, set active dialog panel, takes in the boolean, and then sets active dialog panel to whatever our boolean is. So we're going to make sure that that closes. The other things we want to do are in here. We want to make sure that we remove the answers from the dialog manager, just to get everything ready for the next state, or the next time we open it. We also want to make sure that we set our current animator to null so that it's not looking to, so it's not looking at our game object for what our current animator is. It doesn't go back to the last NPC or anything. We want to make sure that we clear this out so we can get it ready for the next guy that you want to talk to. That's pretty much our closing state. Let me double check and forget anything out of this. I did this a little differently last time, so don't pay too much attention to this. Actually, I kind of like the way I did this last time. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to manually set each one of these booleans inside of the animator parameters. So the way I'm going to do this is I want to set every single bool in my animator to false, because right away they should all be false when I start off, because I don't want to tell it answer 1 when I go to hello, or else it'll go straight to this yes answer down here, which is answer 1. So I don't just want to pass through hello. I want to make sure that all of these are 0, and I also want to make sure is conversating is the false. This is a big bool that we haven't really touched much. We just turned it on at the start, but we'll turn it off when we exit. So we want to make sure it sets to false when we're closing out. So we're going to make sure that all of our parameters set to false. So we're going to do animator.parameter count. So that's going to go through every one of our animator parameters, and it's going to set the bool at index I to false. So I has to start equal to 0, and that will set everything in my animator to false. Okay, and that's our close state. Back on our animator, remember this goodbye that we could sort of just threw up here as a placeholder? Well, let's just add that dialog close state script. Doesn't take any serialized fields or anything into it. We just know that it's going to close everything out whenever answer 4 is true. Okay, so that's simple enough. Let's see what that fixed. So we're in our game, and the only way we can do this is by clicking exit. And now we've closed out our state. We're in the goodbye state. Okay, and this actually doesn't have any conditions. It should be automatically going. So let's figure this out here. This doesn't have any conditions. Well, that's kind of confusing because that's how I had it working earlier, and it worked just fine to send me back. So actually, to do this, we're going to add a condition that is conversating gets set to false. So whenever conversating is set to false, we're going to reset the state machine back to hello. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is in our non-player character, in our dialog trigger script, we go back in here, and we're going to add the other half of this, which we don't need to start an update. But what we do need is on trigger exit. So when we exit the trigger, if the object that's exiting is the player, so compare tag player, just like before, what we're going to do is double check what I had going on here. Let's see. So what we can do is we're deactivating our dialog panel in the closed state. We're handling a lot of this stuff in the closed state, but it is kind of nice to do it again on the on-trigger exit. You notice we're setting is conversating to false, and we're gonna Well, we're going to ignore this, actually. This will be different, because we set this up a little bit differently. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do is get component animator, and we're going to set bool is conversating equal to false. Okay, that way it tells it that we're not conversating anymore, we're not talking, that way we're not interrupting anything else. And then we want to go to the dialog manager. I'm going to grab the same way I did this reference up here. I'm going to grab this again. Alright. And in the dialog manager, make sure the current animator is set to null. Because we don't want it to be referencing our current game object anymore, because we're no longer talking. And then in the dialog manager, we want to call this set active dialog panel, and we want to turn it off. Make sure that it's off. Okay, and then manually running hello, so we don't really need to do anything else. What we can do, though, for clarity and to just kind of make sure that everything works the way it should on closeout, we're going to go ahead and play that goodbye state name. And we're going to make sure that that's on layer 0, our base layer, just like before, to make sure that we play this final state as we're leaving. Just make sure that we tie everything in a nice bow and make sure it all clears out right and gets set up right for the next time. So let's play. That seems to be working. And we're going to throw it through goodbye, and it automatically sprung back to hello. Now it's working fine. So when I exit, we go to goodbye. And that is keeping. That's weird. That's very weird. And when I do this, keep answer 4 equal to true, because that means that it's not getting all of my parameters checked off. So in my closed state, over here, let's try doing a +1 here. It gives me an error. I'm going to be a little more confused, because that really shouldn't be an issue at all. And it's throwing me parameter #5. Oh. Oh, that's fun. It doesn't like that at all. Okay, Unity 5.4 loved that just fine. However, it looks like Unity 5.6 really doesn't so much. So, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put this back at less than 5, and I'm going to do what I did before with answer name is equal to answer plus I, and then I'm going to set bool answer name equal to false. So it's going to set all the answers back to false. Let's see here. You might want to specifically call is conversating and set it to false. Well, actually, that works a little. That works kind of nice. No, let's do this. Let's do this transition if conversating is true. Okay, and then when it sets as conversating to false will be when we're actually leaving. Does that mean that we're still in the bubble to conversate? We're still able to talk, and it should be making sure that this is on when we're in this state. So on state enter, I'm going to add one more thing here. the dialog state. When we enter the state, we're going to make sure we're gonna make sure that this dialog panel is active. It doesn't really hurt to turn it on every time. Again, this is working as a state machine. It's not running every frame. It's not really going to eat CPU cycles or anything like that to check one more Boolean while it's running. And that just gives you a second to rework. Uh-oh. What are you talking about? It's an answer panel script. Same answers don't exist. But that's weird. 4. That's not really possible. That's it. Answer 0 doesn't exist. Oh, I know that. Exit and come back. Well, now it's working just fine. That's quite strange. So I'm gonna remove that for now. Probably do an update patch later. Fix this tutorial for it. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing wrong. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna delete this transition. Because I'll be manually running it anyway. Let's see here. So when we run our goodbye, it says goodbye and it just stays there. And now this is all working. At the end of our closed state script here, all right, so what we're going to do here is sorry. We're going to grab at the end of our closed state, dialog closed state function here, we're going to call the animator dot enabled equals false. So we're going to disable the animator as we exit during our goodbye function. That way, we can totally start over new every time, and we run our goodbye, and it totally stops working everything. That's pretty cool. There it goes. Okay. We have everything setting should, and it exits and closes, and we have this wonky going back and forth thing. Again, I'm gonna do a patch in a little bit as soon as I figure out exactly what's going on that's causing it to not restart the way I had it going before. But I don't really want to waste your time with that. Instead, I'll give you this, it works, and I'll fix it later. If you downloaded the source files before we started this, you'll notice a couple of things are different. Like in the dialog system, the dialog manager, I created 2 functions that aren't in the other scripts. Note this update dialog text in here, and set active dialog panel. These are basically, I had this dialog panel as a public variable, but I like this workaround a lot better because I'd rather have a function be public addressing a private variable than have a public variable that I can just grab anywhere. Again, public variables suck. Try not to use them. unless you kind of need to. Like I've got one here, but try to avoid it. This is a workaround I just discovered sort of while I was going through this, so you'll notice it's not in your source material. But in the source material, the state is working a little better. So if you're following along line by line, then you can just use the source material anyway. I don't really care. It's open source. Use it for whatever you want. Use it, adapt it. This tutorial is really more to show you how I created it and how you can utilize it for your own functions later on. So anyway, getting back to it, we're going to do one more thing before we go, and that's just this inventory. So a lot of times in dialogue, you'll have, like if you've ever played D&D, you always go to the tavern and you talk to the bartender, and the bartender gives you a quest. Like the bartender always has a quest, he always gives it to you right away. But he would give that to you as an inventory object of here's a quest. Or maybe he's got a fancy sword or something he gives you, or a bottle of tequila, whatever, that you can put into your inventory. And this happens a lot from dialogue, and by queuing it up to a simple inventory system, I can give you a good example of kind of how that's going to work. So let's see, in order to do that, we're going to need an inventory manager, first of all. And the inventory manager sounds scary, but it's really, really, really not. We're going to set it to 000, just because it should do that by default. And it makes me feel better. So I'm going to create a new script, sits inventory manager, and then I'm going to drop that on this inventory manager script here, just so that I don't forget. And in my inventory manager, all I really need to have here is, let me double check. My notes are a little scampered here. That's what I thought. I've just got, no, it's an inventory object. Oops. We're going to do that in just a second too. So our inventory manager, see, this is really just, it's very simple, it's very straightforward. Nothing too fancy or out of the ordinary. But let's go ahead and rebuild it. So I need a serialized field of text. So for our inventory manager here, I need an array of text. So I'm going to hit control period, get my unityengine.ui. These are going to be the inventory objects, or inventory objects text. Yeah, that works. That holds together. And this is going to be and the other thing that we need here is a public list of, I haven't created this yet, but it's going to be tick inventory objects. And we need that to be public as well. And this needs to be and we're going to call this inventory objects. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and create that script. So it's happier with me. Create C# script inventory object. Alright, now I have, how did you do that? Alright, so now I have this public list of inventory objects available in my inventory manager. And then I need one public function called update inventory list, call it that. And, oops, that's return type void. And in that function, what we're going to do is we're going to check if the inventory objects, well, okay, here's what we want to do first. Not that. What we want to do is we want to make a new array of inventory objects called inventory, and that's going to be equal to inventory objects dot to array. Now the reason we do that is because what the heck? Oh, right, duh. Alright, losing my head today. Okay, so the reason we do that is because a list is just a stack, so it's a loosely organized collection of objects that doesn't necessarily index in the right order, and we're going to be adding and removing things at random from different places inside of the game, where you want to be able to pick up an inventory object when it's sitting on the ground, and we also want to be able to hand it to you in dialogue and take it away in dialogue or use it or whatever and be able to just add and remove stuff from this list all the time. So whenever we actually want to sort through it and get an itemized list in order, we want to make it into an array just to make things a little more clear and to avoid issues at runtime. So we're going to make a copy of this list into an array called inventory, and then we're going to test if inventory.length is less than inventory objects text dot length. So we're testing, here's all of our inventory object text. So this is our inventory screen, where you see this inventory panel, and we reactivate it. We can see that we have 16 of them in here, or 18. Yeah, 6 times 3, 18. We have 18 in here, and we want to know if we have more, if we have more spots to put things than we have stuff, then we only want to go through however many stuffs we have. So we're going to go for I equals 0, I is less than inventory.length, because inventory.length is the smaller one. And we're going to say inventory objects text dot text, nope, sorry, sub I dot text is equal to inventory sub I dot, it's going to be name for list. And we're going to go ahead and get that into our inventory object, which I don't have open yet. So we're going to go back in here. Into Unity, we're going to open up inventory object, and this is just going to have a public string, a name of name for list. And we're going to leave it public. We're going to expose it to the editor just in case we want to save it somewhere else. What we're going to do is, in our inventory manager, we're going to grab that name for list, and we're going to put that into our inventory objects text appropriately. And then, I don't think I did anything else fancy. Oh yes. And then what we're going to test is if our inventory objects text, yeah, right here, dot length is less than our inventory dot length, then we have more inventory than we have spots to put stuff. So we're only going to put stuff in the spots where we have spots to put them. And then we don't want to keep adding stuff. The avoidance here is you don't want to call a subscript of an array that doesn't exist. Like I don't want to be calling inventory objects text dot 19 because I have 19 things in my inventory when I only have 18 spots, right? So I want to avoid that by making sure I only go as long as the shortest of the two. Okay, so inventory object text, inventory object text, so I dot text is equal to inventory sub I dot name for list. And that's going to make it so that no matter which one is smaller, we're going to do as much as we can. Now, we also want to test, before we do this actually, these are both going to be else if statements. Because by default, we want to fill if inventory dot length is equals 0. So if we don't have anything in our inventory, then we want to make sure that inventory objects text are all set to an empty string that we're just going to call empty. Dot text. That way it's filled with something, a phrase of empty instead of whatever our name for the list is going to be. Okay, so that's kind of that. One other thing I'm going to throw in, just kind of for debugging purposes, normally you'd have this on the player controller or somewhere else. You don't normally handle input or anything like that in a manager script. This is really against convention. I'm going to put this in an extra comment. Debugging code. Do not include in final build. Open on player controller somewhere. Right? Because you don't want to have an update function inside your inventory manager. But since this is just debugging, this is just a tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and throw it in here, but I'm going to tell you that this is bad. Don't do it. So in my update function here, I'm going to say if input dot get button down. Also, really a poor way to do this, but again, this is just an example of what you can do with this code more than anything. So if it's cancel, what we're going to do is we want to set the inventory panel to active. So we're going to grab a serialized field, game objects, inventory panel with a lowercase I. Inventory panel. And then I'm going to keep a private bool is open panel. So I'm going to be able to test if the panel is open or not. I'm also going to do a start function here that just takes the inventory panel and we're going to set active false to make sure that when we first start running the game, we want it to be closed. We're actually going to do this on awake, just in case you're opening this from a loading scene or from a main menu or something like that. This is better practice to use awake than start. For something like this, where I'm setting the active I'm setting the panel to false, and then I'm going to set is open panel equal to false as well. So we're going to say if we are pressing cancel, which by default is the escape button, and if is open panel, well, let's say not is open panel. So if the panel's not open, then we're going to go ahead and set active true. going to say is open panel also to true. And then if is open panel, inventory panel set active, false, just do the inverse, and close it out. Okay. Now what we need to do, that just opens up our panel. And when we do open it, we want to go ahead and update inventory list just to make sure that it's getting updated when it opens, because that's really when you want to do it. We'll go ahead and do it when you close too. I know redundancies, but again, redundancies minimize errors. It's an important thing to remember. Like, you don't want to do something over and over and over again if you don't need to, but on the other hand, you want to make sure that it gets done appropriately. And when you have an inventory list that's like 50 or 100 items long, and you've got them sorted by categories and all sorts of other stuff, you might want to just update it while you close. And then specifically when you add items, or you probably want to move this up just in case it takes extra time before it opens everything else up. Because you don't want it to open and then update the list because it's already printed everything. And it's not going to re-update before it reopens. So that's really our inventory manager script, and that gives us the inventory object, which really just has a name. Then we need one more script, which is the ability to give the player the object from dialog. So I'm going to create a C# script called player item exchange. Actually, clarity. And because I changed that, I'm going to need to change this. Name of the class. And this is state machine behavior. So we don't get start and update. Instead, we get on state enter. Okay. So for this one, I need to double check my notes. I did it before here. Let's see. We're going to grab the inventory manager, and we're going to do it in a sloppy way. Nope, that's the tutorial inventory manager. I'm going to call it the inventory manager, and I'm going to do another try catch statement where inventory manager equals GameObject.find inventory manager dot get component take inventory manager. Alright, and then I'm going to need the catch a system.exception, and in here I need to throw new system.exception. That is, scene must contain an object called inventory manager with an inventory put inventory manager script attached. Alright, so there's my try catch. It gives me a reference to my inventory manager. And when I want to do this, okay, I need two serialized fields in here. One of these is a Boolean is giving. So when the non-player character is giving an item to the player, we're going to check this is giving as true. And when we're taking an item from the player, we're going to leave it unchecked as false for taking it away. It's really the two things we can do. And then we're going to make a reference to tutorial inventory objects, and we're going to call this object for exchange. Okay? So, if we're giving the component to the player, and inventory manager dot inventory objects dot contains object for exchange, and what we're going to do is say animator dot set bool has item, and we're going to set that equal to true. You may recall we haven't set that up yet, but I'll do it in just a minute. So if we're giving the player an item, but they already have it, then we're just going to say, no, they have the item, so we don't need that. If we're giving them the item and they don't have the object, then what we need to do is animator set bool has item, and we need to set that to false. And as long as that's false, then inventory manager dot inventory objects dot add object for exchange. So we're just going to add it into that list. Okay. If not is given, so we're taking away, and inventory manager inventory objects contains object for exchange, so they have the object, then animators set bool, we're going to has item, we're going to set to true. And then inventory manager inventory objects remove object for exchange. Very simple. Right. I'm just going to copy this one this time. And we're going to say we are taking it away, but they don't have it. We're going to set has item to false. And we're going to get rid of that because we can't remove an item that we don't have, or else we'll generate errors. So that's why we check to make sure the object is there before we remove it, because if you call this line remove from the list with an object for exchange that's not in the list, then you get a whole bunch of errors and your game crashes and your players get really upset. So don't do that. It's bad. Make sure we got everything out of here. And then on these where we actually moved items, we're gonna make sure that we update that inventory list again. Rule of thumb, especially if you're just using text like this, call your update list like frequently as you can, or as frequently as makes sense, because like this is going to update the inventory list, but then when we actually open the inventory itself, it's going to update it again before actually showing it to the player, because we just want to make sure that everything's set the way that it is. And if we have the inventory manager open, then we want to make sure that we update that inventory list anyway, just because we added it, because you had the inventory manager open while you were talking to a person. I'm not going to go through making sure that you don't do that. Rather, I would just make it so that you can and it works the way you expect it to. It's really the important thing. Yeah, that's our inventory manager, and that's our item exchange state. So let's get back over here. Let's see. Let's grab this inventory panel. Let's set up these references first. The inventory objects text. It's actually kind of annoying. It's one of those things I probably should just do a get children, but that's okay. We'll do it this way. I'm going to grab all of these text items. I know, clicking 18 times, just so much. But could be worse. I'm just holding down Control and clicking all of these to select just the text items. And, oh, goodness. Oh, that's bad. Alright. Ah, gross. Okay, so you need to lock the inventory manager to your inspector before you select all of these text items. So let's go back through and select 18 text items again. This just really feels like a good use of time. Alright, so now we have our inventory object text. In our inventory object list here, I'm going to go ahead and leave it exposed in the editor. You'll notice in the source files, if you downloaded them before starting this tutorial, that inventory object shows up here. And I went on a rant earlier about why this is a bad idea when you actually ship it out to your designers, because your designers look at it and go, what, I have to give you all your inventory objects? Oh. And they get really confused very easily. So before you ship out your final product, you really want to make sure that you hide this away. But because we're just testing it, I really would like to leave it open so we can watch that inventory object actually populate in that field. So to do that, we're going to create an inventory object, which doesn't have to be anything. So we're going to call it sample inventory object. Alright, and unlock my inspector. And I'm going to add an inventory object script to that. And we have the public field name for menu list right here. And we're going to call this sample. Alright. And our handy little prefabs folder, I'm going to drag my simple inventory object in as a prefab. And then I'm actually going to delete the original instance. As you can see, it's still here in the prefabs, just like we talked about before, where, I don't know why this is messing up. Go to 0. We can grab this prefab and we can just pop it in anytime we want, and everything's here. Everything's set up. It still has a serialized field. It's all right there. Yeah, and then we can just create as many as we want. But we actually don't want to directly create it. Instead, what I want to do is go into my animator, and off of this what script, I'm going to say give item, and then I'm going to say take item. And I'm going to create a new state down here. And this new state is going to be called give item. I'm going to make a transition there. Remember again to zero these out, your transitions, and giving an item was answer 2. When answer 2 is true, we give item. And I'm actually going to duplicate that here. And move the transition down. That is answer 3, true, and zeros. And this is take item. Okay. So I normally do, this is just going to be a dialog state. Same with the take item. Just a dialog state. And I'm going to show something to the effect of I'm giving you the item. And the reason we do this is, if you remember back on the exchange state, what it's looking for is if you have the item or you don't have the item. So we need to first decipher if we have the item or not. And we do that by Actually, I did the script a little bit differently this time. So I actually don't need to do that because I did the script differently. I'm going to do it for this one to use it the way that I have it set up now, because I didn't even realize, but I actually set it up a little bit differently. So here's my give item state. I'm actually going to add the player item exchange state script directly to it. Okay? And we're going to say this is giving. And what makes a transition to give item with answer 2 here. Okay, and then we're going to duplicate this. And this is going to be answer 3. Just like we had before in the what statement. Give item is answer 2, and answer 3 is take item. Okay, so take item. I'm going to rename that. And the object for exchange we can see is right here in the serialized field. And you remember I just made that prefab over here, but then I deleted it. So we don't want to address it inside of the scene, because we don't want to make an object here, the sample inventory object. We don't want to make it and just have it in the scene hanging out, absorbing memory, until we decide that we need to add it to inventory. So instead, we're just going to take the prefab that has all the object data. I'm going to drop it right there. Or at least we're going to try. Gosh darn it. Take item. Why is that not working? Maybe because I used the wrong one. Tutorial inventory object, not a regular inventory object. I'm going to call this sample. Now, an important thing to note is I can directly manipulate this prefab by selecting the prefab down here. Now, if I made an instance of this prefab, and then I adjusted it to, like, say, extra, why not? Then when I look at the prefab, it actually doesn't change the prefab. So I could put a different script on this object. I can put whatever I want on it, as many scripts as I want, and my prefab isn't changed. Now, if you're working on an instance and you want the prefab to change, you can use the apply button down here, or all the way up here. I don't want to do that. I actually want it to be just like the prefab, and I made some changes and I don't like them, so I'm going to revert back to my prefab. So it sets my serialized field, sets my position, and everything is as it should be, or as the prefab is. An error somewhere, we'll deal with that later. So what I'm going to do is delete this object from my hierarchy because I don't need it. And then I'm going to go back into my take item script, or my take item state, and I'm going to put my sample inventory object in there. And then in my give item state, I'm going to put my sample inventory object in there as well. Okay, so that way I'm giving and receiving. Now that I look at it, these texts are tiny. You probably won't be able to see it on the recording very well. So what I'm going to do is take every one of these text items again, because this is so much fun. And I'm just going to do them all at once. I could just delete all of them down to 1 and then just reduplicate them with their final settings. I don't know which one would be faster, but whatever. This is getting the job done, right? We make that size fit from 10 to 67. Sounds like a plan. All this, minimize. Okay, here's our inventory panel you can see. And let's see. What we've done is we added an inventory manager with an inventory manager script that's going to fill all of these with the phrase empty, because it's going to update, right? And then when we get the inventory object, which we're going to get from dialog, And what I normally do from here actually is make another dialog jump. Okay. I took the item taken, and make sure this is with no conditions. I'm actually eliminating the has item parameter entirely here, aren't I? Yeah, that's fine. Item taken, and then if you so choose, you can go back to all the way back up to the top, because why not? And that's 0, and that would be if the answer 1 is true. And we're gonna duplicate that, and we're gonna say given item received, escape to check inventory. Oh, no extra letters. And we transition from give item to here. Do. Okay. And we're going to make a transition from here to hello. And actually, this sort of eliminated one of the nice things I did in the example code that you have that I'm just not going to do at this point. I used has item as a parameter. It's built into the script, like I showed you. It's in there. What you would do is at the end of this script, at the end of taking the item or giving the item, you would have another state that's just going to check, do I have it, do I not have it, and make sure that it worked the way it was supposed to. Normally I'd check it ahead of time, but again, I built this a little bit differently this time around. I'm actually just not going to use it, and I'll let you guys figure that out for yourself, because this, again, is just an added bonus. Not everything needs to work with inventory. I just think it's an important part of a dialogue system, and I think it's important that you understand kind of the basics for that. So let's give this a whirl and see what happens. This should close. Yep. Hello there. You do seem to be working. Can we put all our stuff at what? Okay. And then give an item. Item received. Let's see here. Oh, that's not working. The escape button's not working. That's quite weird. Because that should be hard-coded, right? That's how I did that. Click inventory manager. Is that the right script? Yes, it is. Input give button down to cancel. That should be set up by default. Double check. No. Product settings. Input. If you don't know, this is where all of your input is. It's where all of your input lives. Your input event system is all in here. That is a whole other tutorial on its own. So I have the name cancel, and the positive button is escape. So that's very strange. This should be setting my inventory panel to true, to on, and it doesn't appear to be doing so. Here's the inventory panel, and when I turn it on, I can see that that actually worked just fine. But for whatever reason, my escape button logic here is not working, which is kind of silly, because I just threw it in there for the heck of it. Let's see how I did it before. Input get button down, cancel. Harumph. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's like the fourth time I said that. This tutorial. What? But that seems to happen pretty much all the time with anything you're working on. In Unity, nothing ever acts exactly how you would expect it to. Well, it's setting. It's working fine here. This open panel is false. And it is false. And pressing cancel. And the nested if statement. Separate. So I'm a little confused, but you see the basics of how that's going to work. I'm not really sure why this isn't working. It's something right in front of me, I'm sure of it. But that's really weird, because this is like the simplest thing in the whole world. This would be really dumb. How strange. How strange that you do not work for me. Why do you not do that? Take it, but we don't have the item. I already kind of explained that I sort of just took that out for now. Something you can add in a little bit later. It's in the source code, that extra function or two, in case you want to take a look at it. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. A little more on prefabs, because prefabs save my life more often than not. So let's rename this to tutorial canvas. And what I would strongly recommend, is grabbing your tutorial canvas, making a prefab of it that's got everything set up, grabbing your MPC, also get a prefab, your dialog manager, your inventory manager, all that stuff. That way, whenever you start working on something again, you start working on the next level, yeah, you'll have to fill these in. If you made the inventory manager a child object to the canvas, then it would stay addressed to all of those. So it could help you out a little bit. If you want to make it just one prefab, then these addresses will stay linked up the way that they're supposed to, or else open up every scene and just drag and drop them in. It's 18 clicks, yeah, but it's not the end of the world. So obviously keep prefabs of everything. Yeah. So this has been my first tutorial doing Unity stuff. This was really the first tool I built that I felt other people should be able to build, and seems more complicated than it is. I hope you found this insightful and educational, and I hope you come back and find more tutorials from me in the future. My name is Thomas Mahon. You can check out my website, thomasmahonii.com. That's because I'm the third, so it's pretty easy to remember. thomasmahonii.com. Take a look at my other tutorials and other stuff I have offered. I also have games, and my full portfolio is on here, access to all of my content that I've created. I really appreciate any feedback. If you leave anything on the comments board here on YouTube, I will pay attention to it. I really appreciate feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to go through this tutorial, and I hope the best, and I hope for you the best, and I hope to see tutorials from the people that watch my tutorials. So All the best to you, good luck, and have fun.